Hello, this is Jim Schwab, manager of the Hazards Planning Research Center at the American Planning Association and project manager for Planning for Post-Disaster Recovery Next Generation, a project APA has engaged on with FEMA to develop a new generation book on planning for post-disaster recovery to replace the 1998 version we did years ago for FEMA. And we're here at the Natural Hazards Workshop in Broomfield, Colorado, with the opportunity to talk to a number of people from not only the U.S. but a number of nations around the world. And with me from Taiwan is Wei-Sen Li, who's co-chair of the APEC Emergency Preparedness Working Group and Deputy Executive Secretary of the National Science and Technology Center for Disaster Reduction in Taiwan. And you've had the chance in Taiwan to work on some serious disaster recovery in the last couple of years because of a Typhoon Morakot.
Yep.
Tell us a little about when that happened, what some of the consequences were, some of the issues that you had to face in Taiwan with this disaster recovery because of the typhoon.
You know, during my attending the workshop, Typhoon Li also hit Taiwan.
Oh, wow.
Claim about 40 people died and dozen injuries. But compared the case in 2009, it's still a small one.
Mm-hmm.
In 2009, in the summertime, we are facing the drought problem, totally drought. So when Typhoon Morakot was approaching to Taiwan, comparatively, it's good news to us. Can solve the problem of drought within a couple of days. So at the beginning, the Typhoon Morakot moving fast, very fast. But as he was approaching to Taiwan, slowed down. So according to some rain gauge, especially one rain gauge, it records 3,000 millimeter strength, 3 meters, in 3 days. It caused about 700 people died, $1 billion lost. But the one most devastating event, it was in the Shaolin village. A huge landslide killed about 400 people. They buried by the huge landslide. Left just 2 buildings. Beside everything, gone. So it was a huge blow to our government. You know, we invest a lot on disaster risk reduction for a couple of years. Kind of the devastation to our system, I think, is unacceptable. Why after so many investment we still suffer kind of the big loss? But you know, kind of catastrophe is beyond our capacity to cope with. So after Typhoon Morakot, several thoughts come to our mind. First, about recovery parts. Compared to another catastrophe in Taiwan in 1999, Chichi earthquake, the recovery part is for the urban resident. So the problem is relatively simple. The most focus is about to reconstruction of the residential building. But the case for the 2009 Typhoon Morakot, most affected people, they are indigenous tribe. Mm-hmm. If we relocate them from their original inhabit to the urban area, sometimes we could destroy their culture, even cause the whole tribe disappear. Especially this time, we have to think about where they should live, because most of people they are high vulnerable area. So how to find some safe place, and also keep their original culture is a big challenge. But this time, when we start our recovery work, this time we receive a lot of assistance from the NGOs. Mm-hmm. NGO right now in Taiwan is a big support to our government, especially after the disaster. Compared to government, they are good at communicating with the affected people. And compared to government, they relatively trust kind of NGOs. So this time, it's kind of the win-win situation. Government provides land and the regulation to ease some burden. And the NGO helps negotiate with people about the size of rebuilt building, what kind of the structure they want, and also in charge part of the livelihood recovery. Why we need livelihood recovery? Because we want to provide some economic support to the affected people. So we need some new industrial in some recovery area. So this is some characteristics about recovery from Typhoon Morakot.
Okay, one feature of Taiwan that may not be familiar to people who have not been there or not familiar with Taiwan is that topography, where you have these central highlands, these mountains in the center of the island, which actually mean, in some sense, that there's only a modest amount of actual flat land in Taiwan, and a good deal of development that is perhaps subject to landslide risk as a result.
Yes.
And tell us about some of the challenges that involves.
You know, Taiwan is a small island, about 36,000 square kilometers. Almost 70% is in slopeland. You mean the central region in Taiwan actually average height about 2.5 thousand meters high.
Wow.
So when kind of torrential rain hit the hillside, usually create some problem like landslide and debris flow. So when typhoon casts threat to Taiwan, our major concern is torrential rain, not about the winds. Because some side effects from the Chichi earthquake, ever since we have torrential rain, we have high possibility of landslide and debris flow. And you know, sometimes for debris flow and the landslide, there is no good numerical model to simulate the kind of consequence. So we need kind of the public-private partnership. So, for example, our Water and Soil Conservation Bureau, they have a lot of volunteers in the high vulnerable area. When they receive kind of signal like the yellow warning for debris flow, their volunteer will continue monitoring rainfall by kind of the simple rain gauge. Because the topography of Taiwan, even we had very good weather report, we cannot forecast for some mountain area. So that's a big challenge for us. Topography plus some unpredictable rainfalls.
Right. So could you maybe finish off this little segment by telling us some of the key lessons in disaster recovery that you think Taiwan has learned from this particular event, Typhoon Moriko, and maybe Chichi earthquake, if you want to go that far?
Yes, I think from the recovery part from Typhoon Moriko, it reminds us about land use. Because some of the problem of Typhoon Moriko actually is kind of consequence for the improper land use, because over cultivation in mountain area worsen the landslide and debris flow. And second one is about how the private sector, how the NGO joining government to help recovery process. It's the kind of the very good debate issue in Taiwan, especially what's the role of the NGO, what's the role of private sector in the recovery phase. You know, because sometimes government cannot provide kind of the flexibility to the affected people. So with the system from NGO is also good for us to solve the problem in very short period of time. Another problem for us and challenge is about the cultural preservation, like I explained. Because in Taiwan we have total about 14 indigenous tribes. Sometimes the true tribe cannot live in the same place. They got some problems. So when we do kind of recovery and think about the indigenous tribe, the cultural problem, we must pay a special attention to it. Another one is about the livelihood recovery. You know, especially Taiwan is an aging society. Ever since we have the large-scale disaster, most of young men will leave hometown to seek job opportunity in urban area. So how to provide a very good economic in some recovery area is also need us to think about what is the best way to recovery. So we think about the participation from the local resident and the outsider. What's the balance? And the most important thing is how to rebuild their confidence in government, especially after the large-scale disaster. The most phenomena you can see in Taiwan is that people don't trust government ability to cope with the nature hazards. So how to, through kind of the step-by-step, like from the hardware construction, software master, to rebuild the confidence in people's mind and believe government still have capability to cope with any kind of nature hazard.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being
Thank
with
you.
us today, and I appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Okay, thank you.